Hey everyone, welcome back to Project Turbo. I'm your host Jeremy. In today's episode, we're going to be going over how to install the Fab9 intake manifold in your NC Miata. This is going to be a part of our NC Miata Turbo build series. The reason we're going to be doing this upgrade is that the stock manifold's not only plastic, but it also doesn't have the best flow, doesn't have the best sound. And anytime you can increase flow or increase sound, it's going to make you enjoy the car a little bit more. So that's the big reason for this upgrade. It also has less failure points overall. You know, with having a plastic manifold, there's going to be more failure points on it. And this thing also is easier to work on once it's in the car. With the plastic manifold, it's really difficult to get to certain items like the map sensor and other things like that. So by having this in here, it's going to be very easy to get to everything if I ever need to do any kind of maintenance on it. So stay tuned for more. All right, so this is everything that comes with the Fab9 intake manifold. I did opt for the larger throttle body. It does include a plug-and-play connector. One of the benefits of this, of course, is that it does have a larger opening, so you're going to be maximizing that larger opening of the new intake manifold, as well as that it isn't cooled by coolant. So the factory one is cooled by coolant, where this one isn't. So I saw that as a benefit as well, that I'm going to be able to delete another coolant hose. But you do have, the two pieces of your manifold that you do need to combine. I went for the powder coated black one. I like the look of it. I think it's going to go really well under the hood of the car. They give you the various orb fittings, depending on how you're going to set it up. You may need to buy some other ones. I'm going to get an AN fitting for the EGR. It looks like they give you a block off for the EGR specifically. They give you some couplers for your coolant piping, some gray RTV, the bolts to combine the two halves of the intake manifold, and then some mounting bolts for the intake manifold as well. There's only two of those. I did read that some of the 2.5 guys are having to source their bolts, but for the 2 liter, I think it's a direct bolt in. We'll be verifying that later in the video. So yeah, now we're going to go ahead and get these two parts combined. I'm not going to be using the included gray RTV. The reason being, this is a black manifold, and if you use gray RTV, you're going to see a line around the entire thing of gray RTV. So I opted for some super black. It's pretty much the same stuff. The black's actually more oil resistant, so it should work even better for the intake manifold, and it is specifically labeled for intake manifolds as well. So we're going to be using RTV black, and we'll go ahead and go over how to combine the two halves of the intake manifold. All right, so now we're ready to go ahead and combine the two halves of the intake manifold. So the first thing you're going to want to do is get your RTV ready. So go ahead and get that out. You're going to want to cut the end of it. I like to do kind of the smaller opening that you can do, so I don't cut it way down here. I like it, to be a nice small bead. That way it's nice and easy to make some fine lines. Get your screws ready, get a 4mm Allen wrench, and then you're going to want to find out the orientation of the intake manifold. So if you look at the instructions for Fab9, you can see that the part of the manifold that curves upwards faces upwards, and on the NC Miata, the intake is on the right side of the engine. So it's going to go like this, and then you're going to have the Fab9 logo facing up. So this is the proper orientation. I'm going to go ahead and run a bead of RTV all the way around all these parts right here. So I'm going to go around each bolt hole. I'm going to keep going around the intake manifold cover. Just this entire line I'm going to cover in RTV. I'm going to let it sit for about 2 to 3 minutes until it starts to tack up a little bit. And then once that happens, then I'll combine the two parts, put the screws in, and start tightening them in a sequence. That way we'll get a nice even flush fit. All right, so the first thing you're going to want to do is get the car jacked up in the air nice and high. Not only is it going to make it easier to get things from underneath the car, but it's also going to make it a lot easier on your back working in this section of the car right here. So for my car, I have an aftermarket strut tower brace, so this needs to be removed. If you have a factory one, it also needs to be removed, I believe, in this case as well. So you're going to want to go ahead and start off by removing this. For mine, we're also going to have to remove this sound tube to get to these bolts a little bit easier. The entire intake's going to be coming out with this project. You can no longer use the factory intake with this manifold because it does have a different intake track. I'm going turbo, so we're going to be using turbo specific piping for my intake, but just keep that in mind if you bought this intake manifold, that you are going to have your own intake piping solution. But yeah, besides that, we're going to remove this strut tower brace. We're going to remove the intake and the sound tube, and we're going to get all this out of the way, and then we'll start breaking into the intake manifold itself. All right, so I'm gonna start out by loosening all the clamps with a Phillips head screwdriver. You can also use a 10 mil on these, but I like to use a Phillips to just spins a little bit faster, a little bit easier. And these don't need to be super tight, so they should come loose pretty easily. But you're gonna wanna get these real nice and loose, so that way they can pop off, you know, everywhere that they need to very easily. So let's go ahead and do that now. Next, we're going to want to get the valve cover vent hose off of the intake. With this, you just need a 5/8 fuel line disconnect tool. You can get these assorted kits. I highly recommend these. They're very useful to have when you're working on your cars. But put the 5/8 fitting in here, and you just push it underneath this clip, and it's going to unclip this quick disconnect from the intake manifold. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Push it into place, and it should pop right off. What it does is it just pushes those clips out and allows this to slide off. I'm going to be replacing this with something else since I'm going to be going boosted and I won't be running this back here. We'll go over that later. All right, now we're going to go ahead and remove the intake assembly. So we'll start out just, you know, popping this wire loose. That way everything's free. Get that popped out of the way. You normally can push these together, but we won't be reusing this mount, so there wasn't a reason for me to do that. All right, now we're gonna go ahead and pop this open. We'll unclip our MAF sensor. Here we go. And this should come right out. So this tube should pop off of here. And once you get this tube popped off, you should be able to just get this right off of here. This might be a little binded. Usually it is, just keep that in mind. There we go. All right, so that assembly came right out. Now you're gonna take a 10 mil and you're gonna undo this side. All right, now this pops into the ECU down here, so you're gonna wanna like pop this off when you take it off. So take it out, you know, from the bolt holes. Also keep in mind you have a air feed right here from the front that gives this cold air. So you're gonna be, you know, making sure that you disconnect it from there as well. But once you get it past here, you should be able to pop this off. So right now it's stuck to the ECU, just pull up real hard and then there you go, it'll pop right off. What it is this little plastic piece right there going into that socket on the ECU. Looks like my K&N filter is fine. I'll probably be giving this away to somebody. It only has about 1,000 miles on it, so if you want a K&N filter, let me know. All right, so now we got most of the intake pieces out of the way. We're gonna wanna get this off eventually, but I'm not gonna do that today. Eventually, I'll probably get one of the ECU mounts that mounts it up sideways, so it's even more out of the way. But for now, you know, it'll be fine right there. Now we need to go ahead and we need to remove the rest of this intake piping. So I'm gonna remove this entire track for the sound tube, as well as everything in front of the throttle body. I went ahead and put some gloves on because my hands were getting quite dirty. It's pretty messy under the hood of the car. This car sits outside all the time. So yeah, now we're gonna go ahead and remove the sound tubes. To do that, you know, there's a 10mm bolt here. You also need to undo your evaporation purge solenoid. So to do that, you just need to yank up on this fitting right here. It should just come right out of there. It looks like it does have, you know, a little notch on this side. So if you're having trouble, try pushing it towards the car and pulling up. So that's out. Now I'm gonna go ahead and undo this 10mm, and then it looks like there's two 10mm nuts on the firewall as well. All right, we got that part. We should be able to pull this off of here. All right. All right, now this hose is held in by, you know, a little pop collar right here. You have to kind of get in between it with some like hook tools or a flathead screwdriver to get to pop loose. You'll kind of see it kind of locks on top of each other like that, and you have to separate them out and then pull them apart in order to get it loose. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. There we go, popped it loose. So as you can see, maybe in the video, it has these little teeth right here, and you just need to get something to wedge those teeth loose. All right, so now this is loose. This entire assembly should come out. There we go. Sound tube is no more. Get that deleted. All right, now that we got that assembly out of the way, we can easily get to all the nuts on our strut tower brace. So we're gonna go ahead and get these out. I believe these are 14 millimeter. So I'm gonna go ahead and go all around and get those out. All right, and this elbow that we loosened up earlier should come right off. All right, we'll probably have to figure out a new mounting solution for this because we got rid of the sound tube. There's nowhere to mount the EGR. So I'll probably get a piece of aluminum and bend it right here into a way to where this can mount to it, kind of like the factory location. So we'll go over that later in the video. But for now, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of disconnect this stuff, just kind of keep it over here. All right, next you want to drain the coolant. You can do that by loosening this screw located right up here. All right, next we need to remove the cowl. In order to do this, you need to pop off these little covers. These are known to break, so I went ahead and ordered some replacements, and I'll leave the part number in the description. But you're gonna go ahead and want to pop these off. I'm gonna use a plastic tool to get underneath each of them and pop them off. All right, I was able to get both of them off without damaging them, so I do actually have some extras, and I'm going to replace them anyway. But yeah, they just cover these little screws, and then you just have to remove these Phillips head screws so you can get an idea of what these clips look like. They just have two clips at the bottom. What I did is I kind of pushed it in one direction where it gave me a little lip to get under, and then I got under that lip and just popped it up, and it came right out. All right, I got the cowl off the car. I did have to remove the windshield wipers. It's just a 14 millimeter nut on each. You do have to kind of remember the positioning, but you could just perfect it once you get it done, so don't really worry about it too much. To keep in mind, these little clips actually go into the rubber on the bottom of the seal. So a couple of mine kind of just ripped out and didn't pull out, so just kind of keep that in mind. I'm going to pull them out and put them back in it when I'm done. But a few of them did, rip and just kind of stay in there. You need to remove this access panel. That's going to be done using these nuts right here on both sides. So we're going to go ahead and remove the access panel. Once we get that done, we'll be ready to get to the EGR hose and some other things. There were also 4 bolts up in the back here. So 1, 2, 3, and then the 4th one is slightly under the panel. You can get to it without removing the panel right down in there. All right, getting that access panel out was a little bit difficult. So what I had to do is I had to undo the 10 millimeter nuts that were holding the AC lines to the chassis. So I had to undo those and then pull this end from this side where the intake manifold is, kind of pull this out, and because that side's fixed, so you can't really bend it too much, just enough to where I could clear this little lip and then I could pull the piece right out. While doing this, it's probably a really good idea to clean up in here. So before I put everything back together, I'm going to take a vacuum and some air and blow everything out from up in there. But yeah, that's how you get the access panel off. And now we can get, some clear access to the EGR connection and as well as some of the other bolts that we're going to need to get to. All right, next we're going to remove the throttle body. It's going to be 4 8 millimeter screws. And then there's going to be 2 coolant lines. So one here, and then there's one at the top right over here. So we're going to remove both of those, take out this throttle body, and then from there we're going to go ahead and move on to the power steering pump, and then we're going to do the EGR valve in the back. All right, next you need to take off the power steering pump. So in order to do that, you need to take the tension off the belt. Your tension is now down there. Mine was a 15 millimeter. This is an aftermarket tensioner. I believe it's a Gates. So you're going to put a breaker bar on the tensioner. You're going to push it to the right, and that's going to loosen the tension on the belt. So as you can see, it loosens the tension on the belt. You're going to slip the belt off here. Then you need to take off the 3 12 millimeter bolts. So you have one right here at the top. You're going to need a wrench for that one. This one you can get a socket on, and then there's one at the bottom right under here, and that one you can get a socket on as well. So you need to undo those 3. You also need to take off the spade connector up here on the top. This is super easy. You literally just push on it and pull it right off. So we're gonna go ahead and do that now. Again, easy spade connector. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and undo the belt and then undo those bolts, and then that'll be out of the way. All right, we got our power steering pump out of the way. I just moved it forward. It should be, plenty out of the room for now. Once you do that, you need to undo the EGR pipe. So this is a little bit more difficult to get to. I put the wrench on down there. This is a 22 millimeter. So you may need to get a specialty wrench. I ordered this wrench specifically for this job. You're not going to be able to turn it a lot. You're going to have to go real slow. You'll have a lot of movement. So, it's going to take a little while, but yeah, you need to get down there, get on that nut. And then just turn that loose and get that completely loosened. From there, you'll undo all the bolts to the intake manifold that are holding it to the upper manifold, and then we'll go off and take the lower piece as well. But again, we're going to go ahead and start over here with this EGR nut. All right, it was really hard to get any leverage up here just because of where it's located in the middle of the engine bay. So you have to stretch to reach it. So what I did is I took a little mini sledge, and while I was pulling it, I gave it a few light taps on the back of the wrench while I was pulling it in that direction, and it broke it loose. So if it's stuck and it's not really loosening for you, just try using a little bit of love taps. All right, now that we got the EGR loose completely, that was a real pain. You have to go one turn at a time and flip the wrench, do a turn, flip the wrench, do a turn. Takes a while. It probably took me 50, 60 of those small turns to get it loose. Now we have to go ahead and start removing all of the hoses from the intake manifold area. So with that, we're going to do the brake booster. We're going to undo, these coolant hoses in this area. We're going to undo this evap purge line. We're going to undo the fuel line. We're also going to go back here and disconnect any harness back here. I believe the map sensor harness is back here. We're going to undo the harness from this clip right here. You just pinch this with some needle nose pliers and this pops right off. So we'll go ahead and do that. And pretty much, yeah, you're just going to be disconnecting everything that you can see in this area, just making sure it's fully disconnected. All these little hoses and connectors. This actually isn't going to be reused. I'm not sure what this is exactly, but it's not going to be reused here, so don't worry about this. You can just disconnect it. But again, we're going to be disconnecting just everything right now. Then we're going to start undoing bolts to take this manifold off. All right, for the fuel line, you can use a 5/16 fuel line disconnect tool. And then for this one, I actually just kind of rotated this over, and when you split this apart, it actually is a disconnect as well. I'm pretty sure the fuel one works that way as well, so if you split this, it should come right off. But yeah, just splitting this little ring right here allowed me to pop that right off. So got both of those off. Now I just need to go ahead and go through and do some more of the vacuum lines, and then there's the connector for the map sensor on the back as well. All right, there's the sensor location right down there, so you can just see that. It's going to be a pop clip, so you're just going to push the clip down and pull it off. All right, this clip on the back can be really tough to get to. You need to press this part down and slide it off. Really difficult to get to. So what I did is I ended up using a pair of long needle nose pliers like this with a bend in them. I was able to kind of wedge it down in there and get to it. All right, now you need to remove this T20 Torx right here that holds the coolant T to the intake manifold. So it's the T20 Torx. All right, now we have to remove the upper portion of the intake manifold. We have our harness completely loose from the intake manifold. We also have all of our hoses disconnected. The map sensor is disconnected on the back. So now we're gonna go ahead and remove the 5 bolts on the top first. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then there's one on the bottom that we have to get from the wheel well. So I'll have to remove the wheel to get to that one. So we're gonna go ahead and do that now, and I'll show you a video on the one on the bottom in just a moment. All right, this next screw is very difficult to see, but you can just see it right there in the center of my screen. I'll go ahead and circle it there so you can see where it is. But that's the one that we need to go ahead and loosen up. That's the bottom screw. It's gonna be very difficult to get to. Probably gonna use quite a few extensions, but I'll let you know what works. All right, that bolt on the bottom was super difficult to get to. What I used was a 10mm flex head wrench. What I did is I bit the wrench like this, got it on there, got it all the way up to here, then straightened it out and got it to where my knuckle was kind of between the engine block and the wrench. And then just by extending my hand, I was able to kind of put a lot of pressure onto the wrench to break it loose. It was very difficult to break loose, I will say. So, this is what I use. Might work for you. I wasn't able to get a socket on it. It's not a straight enough run to get a socket on it. So just keep that in mind. And don't make that the last bolt you take off. So what I did is I left the easiest bolt for last, which is this one right up here on the top. That way the weight of this isn't on that bottom bolt. That way you can kind of freely spin it by hand once you get it broken loose. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove this bolt, and then this whole assembly should lift right out here. All right, we got the intake manifold out of the car. It was really tough to get this out. One of the biggest difficulties was getting to the PCV hose, which is located in the middle in between it, where you really can't get anything into. So what I did is I put a breaker bar down through this little area, and I used this part as leverage, and I kind of got into there and I just popped it over, and it was able to slide it off of that PCV hose. I also used a flathead and kind of pushed it from the end as well. So I assisted it with the flathead, and then I also had the extension bar kind of pulling it off, and that popped it off for me. Once I got that off, it was really tough to kind of maneuver it up and out of here. It was really, really tight. You kind of have to hold the whole harness over to the side, as well as the fuel line and everything else, like really pull it out of the way. There was also an extra screw on this coolant tee, so just a heads up there was an extra screw on this coolant tee that you need to take off. It's a T20 as well. But once I got all that off, it is clear now. We're going to go ahead and remove these last 5 remaining 10mm bolts that holds this upper portion onto the head. You should be able to easily, find the bolts, and then we'll go ahead and remove those and move on to the next step. All right, this is the part that can get confusing depending on how you're setting up your car. All the cars are a little bit different through the years. So I'm going to go over, all of them and how you might be running this setup on your car. So the first thing to keep in mind is your EGR coolant line. So you need to figure out, are you going to be keeping your EGR or are you not? If you're not keeping it, you don't need to be running a line there. And you can delete that and you can cap it off at the other end if you need to. So, you want to figure that out. I'm going to be keeping my EGR. So I'm going to be replacing this 5/16 line with a triple ply line. I'm probably going to run it around this outside right here. There's a pretty big opening on this right side because I am going to be having a stainless steel EGR pipe coming off of here. So I'm going to get a 5/16 line, and that's going to run to the throttle body hose that connected to the throttle body that goes to this hard line right here. So I got this hose right here. I put a little coupler in it. The other throttle body hose is going to be getting deleted. So you're supposed to delete the T. So this T right here, this is the other throttle body hose that went to the throttle body. This whole T gets deleted. So you want to be deleting that. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be running a Mad Fabworks oil purge and an oil cooler kit. So both of these pipes go to the factory oil cooler that came with my 2013 NC. Your car might not have an oil cooler. So if you do have an oil cooler, you can run a coupler between this pipe and this pipe, and that would, have that connection, and then you would just leave this as is. With mine, I'm going to be deleting that oil cooler. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be getting a new hose to run from here over to the thermostat, and it's going to take this top line on the thermostat. So if you don't have an factory oil cooler, that's probably going to be the same route that you're going to be taking as well. So just keep that in mind. All right, so we're going to go ahead and remove this T. I already undid the top one. I replaced this hose with an HPS hose previously, so it came off really easy. The other one, you know, it's just going to twist right out of there. Oh, there we go. A little bit of rust on that. It looks like a little corroded. Gonna be nice to get that out of there. All right, and then again, mine is gonna be running from this hard line to the thermostat. I'm gonna go ahead and replace the thermostat while I'm in here. I highly recommend that you consider replacing your thermostat while you're doing this install. Mine's actually stuck open, I'm pretty sure, so I needed to do this anyways, but I've been waiting till this install to do it because this is normally very difficult to get to. So now that I have it, I'm gonna go ahead and replace this. It just looks like it's these 3 8mm bolts. Yeah, it looks to just be 3 of them. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those, and then it just pops off and you just put the new one on and tighten it up. It's a pretty easy install. All right, new thermostat is on. The thermostat is this whole assembly. It comes as one piece. It's just those 3 8mm screws, just 1, 2, and then there's a third on the bottom corner. Again, only 3. There's not a fourth. You only undo those 3, pull it off. The rubber gasket might get stuck there. Just pull it off, put the new one on, and then just snug these up nice and tight, but not too tight because this is plastic and you can't break it. So, you know, just get them nice and tight. I used a 1/4-inch wrench. That way I didn't go too tight. All right, up next, I'm going to be replacing some of my coolant lines. I had bought one of the HPS kits with all the hoses for this car, at least it has most of them. So I couldn't get to this line with the intake manifold there, obviously. So I'm going to go ahead and replace this one now, this short one right here, and then this large one that kind of bends around right here. I got all these, you know, it came with this kit. It also came with, you know, a lot of the ones for, you know, the front over there, also, you know, over here, and also the, you know, heater lines as well over there. So it replaces almost all the lines around the car. Again, this car is 80,000 miles and I'm going to track it, so I don't want a cooling system leak. The only time I've ever had an issue on track, it was a cooling system leak, and I blew a hose on track on a car that had about 100,000 miles on it. So that's one of my first things I like to do whenever I'm going to track a car is start upgrading the cooling system. So again, just going to go ahead and pop all these off. They're just held on by clips, and then I'm going to be putting clamps in their place, you know, to replace those clips going forward. And then here's how I have the fitting set up on the manifold. So I have the smallest one in the front. This is what I'm going to be running the evap to. This one is the one that I'm going to be running the brake booster to, and then this one goes to your PCV valve. So PCV valve, brake booster, and then that's going to go to your evap. I'm going to be teeing my boost off of the evap because I just think that's the best place to pull it from. So I'm going to be teeing off my boost pressure from this one. I'm not going to be teeing it from the brake booster. And then this is a swivel 10AN orb fitting. So the bottom of it's 10AN orb. The top of it is 8AN fitting. And the nice thing about this is it actually can be turned, and you know, it's pretty firm, so it actually will hold position pretty well. But it can turn, so that way if I need to adjust it slightly for that hose, I'm going to be able to do so. So that's why I went with this one. Hopefully it doesn't leak. You know, I know this is probably some type of rubber seal down in here, so we'll see, you know, what kind of temperature, you know, can withstand. If it does start leaking, you know, I'll have to figure something else out, maybe do like a more solid connection. But I wanted to try out, you know, having something that could swivel for now. So yeah, you're going to attach, you know, one side of your EGR hose here, other side, you know, to the engine, and, you know, keep it away from anything it could burn, keep it away from anything it could fray, you know, just keep those things in mind when it comes to the EGR. All right, guys, here's the hose we're going to be using for the EGR valve. This came from Process Hose up in Michigan. This is what they actually use, Fab9 used on their instructions when they showed, you know, the hose that was installed there. So I asked them what company they used, and it was Process Hose. So this is a 1/2-inch single braid hose with the swivel JIC fitting ends. JIC is pretty much the same as AN, but they don't have as accurate threads. They thread onto AN fittings fine, and they are 37-degree head, so it does seal perfectly. The reason you need to use this hose is, I don't know if you can see it in there, you probably can't, but this is completely stainless steel. There is no Teflon or rubberized interior. It is corrugated stainless steel in the middle of this, surrounded by braided stainless steel. So this is a completely stainless steel hose that can handle heat. You know, this can handle the exhaust heat. I'm actually going to go ahead and I put this sleeve on it as well. So this is a heat sleeve that kind of reduces the amount of heat that it radiates. I'm mainly doing this because stainless steel is very abrasive. So when you have a stainless steel hose, if it rubs against anything, it'll pretty much tear it apart, or, you know, cut through rubber. It'll start to wear, you know, on any hard lines and things like that. So putting this soft cover on is really nice. Not only is it going to keep the heat from getting to everything, but it's also going to keep the stainless steel braid from fraying or destroying anything. So, you know, do recommend that. I got this stuff from I got this stuff from Raceflex out of Orlando. Their own anhosefittings.com is their website. They honestly have some of the best AN fittings that I've found anywhere. I'm really happy with the quality of their AN fittings, but they sell AN hose, they sell heat sleeve, they sell a little bit of everything. So again, the hose itself is from Process Hose in Michigan, and these are swivel end jig fittings. I'll put a picture of exactly what I got, you know, there. All right, guys, so I just want to go over the EGR setup just so it's real clear to everybody, you know, exactly what you need to do. So again, I went with a triple ply hose for this. I believe it's 5/16 triple ply. The reason I went with a triple ply is I'm going to push this down right here and zip tie it. But you can see just how close this is to this, you know, opening right here. And that's another reason why I put that coating of that, you know, material on the outside of the tube, is that I don't want it abrasing this and causing a coolant leak right here. So by holding this down and having that cover, it should clear and it should, you know, give me a little bit of room. But it's also, you know, again, worth going triple ply. That way you just have extra layers, you know, to go through before anything happens. That way, hopefully, maybe you'll catch it before you have a major failure. So, you know, that's this setup is a 8AN to an M22 by 1.5. I went with a stainless steel one. And then this is just a copper washer, an M22 copper washer. I did that so I had a good seal, you know, between the two parts. So you're going to connect that, you know, to the tube. All right, now we're almost ready to put the intake manifold in. What you need to do before you do that, though, is put your service panel back in that we removed earlier. Put your cowl panels back on, and then you're going to want to tighten all these lines, you know, back up into place, these hard lines on their mount. So pretty easy to do. You know, we did bend that one earlier, the coolant line, so just keep in mind that you need to make sure that thing is bent straight down. Putting this back in is pretty easy. Just make sure, you know, you put the clips into the strip, and then you'll just push them into place. Pretty easy, you know, pretty straightforward. They pop right in, and there we go. Got mine done. All right, so my strip's in place. I got all the cowls bolted down, so everything's looking good here. Now I just need to, you know, mount these strips on, and then I'm going to connect my coolant lines down here, and then I'll be ready to slide the intake manifold in. All right, so let's just do a quick recap of where we're at so far. We're getting ready to install the intake manifold. So I ran a 3/4 inch line to the thermostat. Because I deleted my oil cooler, I had to do that. So keep in mind, you know, again, your routing may be different depending on how your car's set up. You just barbed it right here and went down and kept your oil cooler. So if you did keep your oil cooler and your car had one from the factory, you would have a barb here and you would just be connecting the two hoses at that barb. Again, I deleted my oil cooler because I put in a Mad Fabworks unit. So I went ahead and ran this line, you know, just directly to the thermostat. Next thing is I needed a longer PCV hose. So I just got some push lock 5/8. I did put a hose clamp on it because this is going to be under boost. So I want to make sure that this hose doesn't get blown off from boost. So, so I have this all ready to go. We got our EGR line right here. This is that line from Process Hose. Everything's ready. You know, I got the shield pushed back, you know, closer to where all the coolant lines are. That way it won't chafe them as much. Should give them, you know, some good protection. And then everything's pretty much just ready to go. I got the lines pulled out of the way. I already did one fit of like putting it into place and seeing how things lined up. My hose was too short, so I had to change that around. But other than that, everything worked out pretty well. For the EGR line, I connected it to this, you know, line that comes off of it right here, and I did tie strap it, you know, to here. You don't need the zip tie. I just did that as extra. This thing actually naturally wants to go that way, which is really nice. So it gave it some really nice routing. And again, that's a triple ply hose, triple ply because it is going to be pretty tight, you know, against the EGR right here. So it's better to have something that's, you know, going to be able to deal with a little bit of rubbing. So yeah, we're ready to go. We're going to go ahead and put it on. So we're going to put our gray RTV, you know, across the head, and then once we have that on, you know, we'll let it sit for like a minute or two, and then we'll put it into place and bolt it all up. I'll go ahead and get that filmed for you guys. I will say I also went ahead and plugged in my knock sensor, so I went ahead and got that done as well. So that way that's plugged in, and then I also plugged in my AC condenser. So I unplugged that earlier. There's one little plug down in there, and I went ahead and plugged that back in now, just so you know, I don't have to go down in there, you know, once it's all in place. All right, guys, we're ready to put the intake manifold on. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some RTV around the flange, all the way around on the block side. The reason I'm doing the block side is you're going to be maneuvering the intake manifold in here, and you might hit something with it, where if you have it on the block side, you just got to get the manifold to it. So it's less likely that you're going to knock some off. So I'm going to put it on the block side. They include the RTV with the kit. I'm going to use the gray here because it doesn't really matter since you won't see it. When you do that, you're going to want to, you know, route this underneath. It's going to be a little tricky, so just take your time. Make sure you don't scratch it. Watch this fitting right here. It's really easy to scratch it on this, but honestly, I was able to avoid it all pretty easy. A big tip is pull your harness kind of out of the way, you know, out here, because like this extra space out here is really necessary because you have to push it into position. So I'm going to go ahead and put on the RTV, and then I'm going to grab the intake manifold and we'll put it into place. All right, guys, my intake manifold is in. It wasn't too bad getting it in there. You know, just kind of be careful right around this part, you know, just like kind of flip it down into there. That's the way you want to do it. And then just make sure you get all your bolts in. So just a heads up on the 2.0, you can't use your factory bolts. You do need to use aftermarket bolts. So, you know, make sure that you have those in your kit. I guess some of the early kits didn't come with them. Brian over at Fab9 got them over to me quickly, but do want to call out that you do need to use, like these Allen head bolts. They're a little bit shorter, than the factory ones. One of my holes actually was stripped. So one of the ones that the factory dowel went into, the bottom hole here was stripped. I have a helicoil on the way, so you know I wasn't able to put one in that hole, but I have them in every other hole. Every other hole worked fine. This hole is also a little bit shallower where the dowels go. I put a boroscope in it because I've noticed one of my bolts was bottoming out in it. I tried retapping it, and that just didn't work. So I'm going to get a helicoil kit and put a helicoil in there. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and run without it. Again, from the factory, this is a dowel pin here. So I think I'll be okay without it, because normally it's just a dowel pin. So, you know, it doesn't normally have a bolt even holding it in there from the factory. And I think with all the other bolts in there, it should be more than enough. So now we, you know, just need to do a few more things. We got, you know, all of the fuel line hooked up. When you do your fuel line, make sure you take it off the bracket down there. There's that white bracket that it connects to. If you disconnect it, the hard line from that, you're going to be able to swing it underneath the manifold more. If you don't do that, it's going to be like kind of coming up right up against the manifold, and it's going to be like kinking your line and just, you know, potentially damaging or causing a leak. So you want to bend that hard line underneath the manifold. That way it has a nice route, you know, straight up underneath. So that's what I did. I got mine all set up there. The next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get all the lines underneath hooked up. That can be a bit difficult. The first thing that I did is I disconnected this brake booster hose on both ends. I disconnected this end first and then reconnected it over here. That was a little bit easier way to do it. And then when you do the EGR, you know, valve, that was a little bit difficult, but you can get a hand in here pretty easily and kind of fit a tool in there as well. So I was able to get a crescent wrench on it and torque that down. And then, you know, we got our evap sensor. So what I did here is I'm running, of course, this to my boost controller. So yours may not look like this. You may have, you know, just the plain hose, you know, going right up over there, which I still do have. But what I did is I, you know, disconnected it from the bracket. I just cut this little plastic edge off, and then I'm going to use this hole down here. So there's this hole, you know, on your factory strut tower that you can use, and I'm going to go ahead and put a bolt with a washer on that, and then that way, you know, this will be kind of mounted down in there out of the way, so that way it doesn't, you know, hit my brake lines or anything like that. So it's going to be kind of down in there, you know, on the other side, like down in here, and it'll be hard mounted, which will be really nice. It'll also keep it, again, from like hitting these hard lines and, you know, damaging them or anything. So that's what I'm going to be doing with my my evap valve. All right, and there's the finished product, the evap valve. So again, I just put a washer on the bolt that, went into it from the factory, just a thin washer that was big enough to not be pulled through that hole, and then just tightened it down in there. And it looks really nice. It's out of the way. It's not hitting, any of my other lines or anything like that. So it's a really ideal place to put it, to be honest. I did cut, the tape that was holding the connector at a weird angle, down at the bottom. So you're going to want to do that so you have a nice, amount of cable here. But yeah, this is like kind of perfect, for rerouting this. And then again, I have this going to my boost controller over there, and then down to my turbo. One thing is I do have the ND map sensor, so this is an upgraded one that is more sensitive. I'm gonna get an extended length here so I can route it underneath. I think that would look a lot cleaner and be a lot nicer. So I am gonna get a longer connection, but I do have this already connected. You do have to cut your tape back in there. There's some tape that kind of holds this to the other harness, so you're gonna want to cut that tape. So that way you can get a little bit more length out of this. There's also tape that was holding this at an angle, and you're gonna wanna cut that. But it is pretty tight. So as you can see, even if you had the regular sensor here, this would be a really tough stretch for it to reach. I wish this one did go that way like the factory one does, but I need this because I'm gonna be boosted. But just kind of keep that in mind, when you're getting this hooked up. Yeah, other than that, we're pretty much ready to go. So we're gonna go ahead and put back on the power steering pump. We're gonna go ahead and do that first. Then we're gonna do the throttle body, because once you get the power steering pump in there, it's gonna be, with the throttle body out of the way, it's a lot easier to get to all these bolts. Once you put that throttle body there, it's gonna be a little bit tighter. So that's why we're gonna do it in that order. And then we should be pretty much done. All right, the power steering pump is in and it's plugged in. Be very careful. It's really tight right here. I actually nicked my manifold a tiny bit. I'll just cover it up with like a black Sharpie or something so it won't be that noticeable. But that is really, really, really close, and it is really easy to just chip a little paint right here. So just be very careful, when putting it on. But other than that, it's just 3 bolts. You got one there, and one on the bottom directly below this one, on the underside. So you'll just tighten those up and then you're all set. You do want to route, your wire out of the way. It looks like mine kind of naturally wants to go out of the way. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go ahead and pull this onto the other side of the motor mount and zip tie this here. Well, actually, I'll probably just leave it there and zip tie it there. And then I bought some replacements for the factory clips. These were just rotted away and broken. So I'm going to pop those off, and I bought some replacements off Amazon. So I'm going to replace these and run the, this wiring harness through there. I'm also going to wrap this part in some tape and add some new protective sleeve over here because this is all broken and cracking from age. All right, now what we need to do is we need to go ahead and put some gray RTV on the seal for the throttle body. Put the throttle body on, tighten up the 4 bolts. Fab9 says you want the motor facing this way, so I'm going to see what the clearance looks like for that right now. I've seen a few other people put the motor on this side. I wanted mine having the connector over here in kind of hidden, and then having the motor over here, but we'll see, how it turns out. All right, guys, I got my belt back on roughly. I want to show you just a little trick when you're putting a belt on, if a serpentine belt, if you're not sure, how it goes and you kind of forgot how you took it off. If the pulley does not have grooves on it, usually the flat part of the belt is going to go towards that part. If the pulley has grooves on it, the grooves are going to go towards the pulley. So you can see like that one has grooves. So the groove part of the belt is going to face towards it. This one's flat. So flat part of the belt's going to be towards it. And you can pretty much see I have it pretty much all the way on, again, just following that principle. All I have to do now is I have to, get a wrench on the tensioner down here, and then once I pull that in, I'll be able to slip this on. So I just got to get the tensioner right down there, and I'm going to put a wrench on it. What I like to, you have to make sure you hold the belt below it, so that way you can get the belt on there when you have a wrench on there. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, once that's pulled in and out of the way, you'll slip the belt on there and you're done. But again, just remember that trick. If it's flat side of the belt goes towards it. All right, I got the throttle body installed. Really easy. Again, just put a layer of RTV between it. Make it nice and, what I did is wipe it down with a glove and made it kind of a smooth layer. And then I just, put them together and tighten it down. Again, use a 1/4-inch wrench. These are 8mm threads into aluminum, so you want to be very careful. What I like to do is, put your hand like this when you're tightening. That way you're not using all the leverage that the wrench has to offer. You're really just, going down here, and then just go until it feels snug, So if you're down here and you go until it feels snug, it's probably going to be plenty tight for these 8mm threads. You got 4 of them, and you got RTV that's going to work like glue almost, holding these together. So you really probably won't have these wanting to back out anyway. But that's how I have it set up. I ran that wire across and dropped it back into there. I'll probably zip tie this up, out of the way. So I'll probably zip tie it up here so it, doesn't have any chance of, like, for some reason touching this belt. Because if you look, it does look like it, could get close to this belt, so definitely gotta zip tie these up to here once I, get this harness all set up. All right, as you can see, I cleaned up my harness a little bit and I replaced the zip ties from the factory locations that were all, busted up and worn out from weathering over the years. You can get these on Amazon for pretty cheap. I think it was like $15, and it came with like hundreds of them of different assorted types and sizes. So they're good to have because these things always start to fail on cars, around 50, 80,000 miles. So I replaced them. I wrapped this with some X-Fasten harness tape, and I also put a protective sleeve over it. So I have some of this protective sleeve. I like this kind because you can just like slip it on anywhere, which is kind of nice. So I slipped some of it on for that bare area that was here, and I wrapped this whole thing with tape, and then I also rewrapped this entire part with it, and then I wrapped it all in tape as well. So it's all nice and sealed now. It looks like brand new, and it's all laid out nicely. Couple other things I did to keep wires out of the way is I did tie both of these together. So I just taped both of those together. That way, this is like kind of pulling it back this way away from the power steering. And then I also zip tied it up here. So with that, it's gonna keep those wires out of the way. All right, I made a block off plate for the factory sound tube. It was super easy. I just bought some ABS plastic off of Amazon, just a sheet of some ABS, and cut it with a Dremel. I just traced the factory part that mounted there onto this and marked the holes, and then just cut it and drilled it. It was real easy. It's not the prettiest thing, but it does the job. So I decided to go back and replace the coolant hose that I use. So I want to kind of show you the 2 types of coolant hoses that I sourced initially. Again, I decided to go ahead and replace these before I even, get the car started with the new build. So this is the 3/4 inch that I use. It was just some, decent 3/4 that was made in the US that I found on Amazon. It's only single layer, so that's kind of why I'm choosing to, get something else. This stuff's like easy to kink. It's also easy to puncture. I could, punch through it with a screwdriver like really easily with not that much pressure. So let me show you kind of the difference between what I'm replacing it with. So I'm replacing it with this triple ply. So as you can see already, there's a lot more, plies of thread material, through this. It's a lot harder for me to even bend this, with my fingers and try to like squish it. So it's way more robust, and there's just way more, to cut through for any punctures or anything like that. So I'm going with triple ply hose. I'm going to put links to this hose company because I'm actually like really impressed with this product. It's really nice. It kind of reminds me of the stuff that Fab9 Miata uses in their radiator, hose kits and turbo kits. It kind of reminds me of that really high quality stuff that they use. So I really like it. And here's our finished product. The intake manifold is installed. Everything's hooked up the way it needs to be. I went around and just made sure, all my plugs are in everywhere, even the ones, underneath and everything like that. My intake solution's a little different. I have a turbo kit, so, my intake solution may look a little bit different. So just kind of keep in mind, how you're going to need it. This is a 30-degree elbow. If anyone needs to replicate this, that's a 30-degree to kind of get that straight shot. So hopefully that will give you an idea of, how you can route your intake depending if you're, naturally aspirated or if you're boosted. And then, it's pretty nice with this new intake manifold because if you need to work on anything, if you take the power steering pump out of the way, which is only 3 bolts, you have tons of room underneath there to get to everything. Whereas previously you would have had to remove the entire intake manifold to get to anything there, like the PCV valve or any of that stuff. So it's a lot easier for maintenance now. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's episode. If you like what you saw, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more content. I will have the turbo kit install coming out very soon. But yeah, your install is complete. So all you need to do now is get your intake solution figured out and get a tune for the car. Fab9 does provide tuning services if you need it. They have VersaTune and they also have ECU Tech. I'm a big fan of ECU Tech myself. You can add a auto blip feature with that. You can also do launch control, no lift shift, and it has a Bluetooth interface that can go to any Android or Apple device. I actually run it on my GTR as well, and you can set up a custom dashboard on ECU Tech, which is really awesome. I'll actually share a short clip of what that looks like. Also, since the turbo kit is fully installed behind me, and we're just working through some tuning. I'm gonna go ahead and share a quick clip of a poll to end this video. Enjoy.